Go ahead and call this meeting to order. I'd like to recognize and welcome those that are in the audience with us tonight. First order, if you would please rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Hout, if you would please read the school board norms.
School board, or the board developed norms are, the decisions will be based on the board's strategic plan, its mission, and what's best for students. The board will act as stewards of tax dollars. Board members will complete foundation work and be prepared for meetings. Meetings will be efficient. All perspectives will be voiced and heard. All board members will maintain a professional decorum.
Thank you. We have no public communication at this time. Are there any conflicts of interest to declare? With that, moving on, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Motion by Roger, seconded by Steve. Any discussion? Yes,
I had a
Jason?
question. I had a few questions or points of clarification on the administrator negotiations minutes. Can we discuss that during that time? No changes or no revisions, just some clarification questions. Would that have to be pulled off now, or can we wait till we discuss that later?
It would be, these are just reviewing the minutes that took place of that. So to bring up questions will take place when there's action on the actual master agreement.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving into our regular agenda, we have nothing under recognition, correspondence either. So moving into reports, do we have a student council report this evening? Oh, please come forward. Good evening.
Hi. Okay, so I don't know if you guys remember me. My name is Jess Chandler, and I'm the executive board president for the JHS Student Council. I don't really have much to report on other than that we're in the middle of planning homecoming, which is October 4th. We're kind of focusing on school pride and making sure that everybody feels welcome to be involved in activities and stuff. So we're doing a lot of the same stuff that we've been doing the past homecomings, but we're starting some new things. One of which is we actually got a DJ for our dance, which will hopefully increase our numbers, and it won't put a damper on our school student council budget at all. And a lot of students are very excited for that as well. The other thing is I'm actually on our statewide student council board, and through this I get to go through a lot of cool things. And one thing I did this past spring is we went to the South Dakota State Student Council Convention, and it's kind of weird to see how their schools run compared to North Dakota schools. And one thing that they do a lot for homecoming is that they hand out Casey's breakfast pizza the morning of homecoming. I thought it was kind of really cool. So what we're doing is we're handing out donuts the Wednesday late start morning. The week of homecoming, we're calling them dollar donuts, and you pay $1, you get a donut. And then whatever, we're still trying to figure out where that money will go into, whether it'll go into paying for the DJ or whatever. The other thing that we actually just got approved by Mr. Gaylor this morning, which is we're actually really excited for. So I don't know if you guys have seen this article floating around about this little boy who could not afford a University of Tennessee shirt, so he drew it on, and then he got bullied, and then they made it their signature shirt. So we actually kind of were moved by this, and we saw that other schools were doing this, so we wanted to kind of implement this into our school. So we talked to Originals and worked out a deal, and we're in the process of talking to businesses and stuff, but our goal is to hand out a free shirt to every single student at JHS for homecoming. So we're actually in the process of that. We just need a few more business donations, so we're asking around. But yeah, we're very excited for that. Other than that, we're just kind of working on the same old homecoming things. We're getting some good progress, so that's all I have to report.
Well, thank you so much, and we are thrilled to hear you involving the community and getting them to support us, because we know that they do, and championing a great cause in our nation to stop bullying. So that's really great. Does anybody have any questions or comments for her? Heidi?
I just want to comment that I think your plan to increase school pride is fantastic, and appreciate your efforts. So thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Have you hit up Egg Country Farm Credit Services for T-shirts off the top of your head?
We have not done Egg Country Farm Services. We called Valley Plains Equipment today and Farmers Union, but they were both busy, so I'll get back to them tomorrow, of course.
Make sure you put us on your list, and Hout Funeral Homes.
Okay.
Okay, Ron, Mr. Holt.
My question was, how much are the T-shirts combined, or what is the dollar you're looking for totally?
So originally, with we have around 700. I don't remember 720 something students, not only at Jamestown High School but north as well. So it's $450 a shirt, and then Originals is willing to knock down the price to $395. So that brings our total to 2,600 something or other. So yeah.
Well, we certainly thank Originals working with our students.
Definitely.
And working on that price. Anybody else have any other questions or comments? Thank you so much. We always do
you.
enjoy any report from our
Yes,
students.
thank you. Thank you.
Moving on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Leck.
So my report is written, just a few items to focus on. I'm going to pass this around. This was the North Dakota Recreation and Park Association Partnership Award. Jamestown Public Schools was honored with that award last week. That was focused on the early literacy interventions that have been taking place through the Striving Readers Grant. As you're aware, On Track Learning Center is one of our 3 primary partners, along with St. John's Academy's pre-K program and Head Start, as well as, of course, we work with other child care agencies, but those are our 3 primary partners. And due to that and the success that we've seen through those interventions, Amy Walters, the track director, nominated us, our district, for this award, and we were the North Dakota, or the recipient of the one partnership award in North Dakota through NDRPA. So that was a big honor. Heidi Larson came along with me last week, and we accepted the award and talked just a little bit about what it was, and they had a nice slideshow. It was really a nice honor, so wanted to pass that along. Board conferences, so NDSBA and the North Dakota, or the National Board, the School Boards Association, conferences are coming up. Make sure that you are visiting with Amy if you are looking to register for those. A note with the State Association, the annual conference, everything is online now. In the past, we were able to make changes if people changed their minds and it wasn't working out. Now we would be charged a full price to do that, so it's really not worth the early bird if you're unsure, or the little bit of savings we get through the early bird if you're not sure, if you're going to be able to attend or not. So visit with Amy when you can. When was the deadline for that? I think we talked about that last. October 1st. So make sure that you're visiting with her. In the event you can, we can always register there. So make sure that if you know that you're attending, that we register early. The national conference rotation this year has Bob Toso and Melissa Gleason attending. That is April 4th through the 6th in Chicago, and early registration starts the 17th of October. So if you can get in touch with Amy, so we can try to get you registered if that works for you as soon as possible. I included 2 grants, a CTE Innovation Grant by Mr. Gaylor, Music Education Grant. The Music Education Grant came from really special funds through the legislature. Representative Owens really championed this grant, and they really wanted it to be a one-time infusion for any special projects in elementary music. So we brought the team of elementary music teachers together and said, what do you think the best plan is? And I actually talked to the interesting thing about it is the day that we submitted it, Representative Owens was here. We had a focus group meeting, and so I shared the grant with him, and he felt like it was exactly what he wanted in the grant. And I know Mrs. Schmidt said that she'd like to have an update on that at some point in the future. So once that gets implemented, we can look to that. So there's the Music Education Grant, the CTE Innovation Grant. This supports the FIRST Robotics program. I share these because we take them to board approval, but I want you to know that they don't have any need to sustain. It is a one-time dollar. It isn't the need to support financially after that. So know that when you go through approval. One other thing that in relation to grants, part of the Striving Readers Grant, Audible, if you're aware of Audible, the audiobooks, made really a nice gesture for all of the districts across the country that are involved in, well, I'm assuming it's across country. I know it's in North Dakota, but through Audible, all of our 9 through 12 students will receive 12 audiobooks of their choice through Audible at no cost. All of our teachers at the high school receive 12 audiobooks of their choice at no cost. And all of our classrooms will receive a library of 75 select audiobooks through Audible at no cost. So really a wonderful gesture, a great opportunity for our classrooms, for our students, just by being, being a part of the Striving Readers Grant just continues to reap benefits for our district. So excited about that as well. I provided a superintendent evaluation timeline. That's just my suggestion. If you want to follow through, however timeline you want to do, that was just a suggested one, just to make sure that you can get everything you need to get done by November 15th. I've also included a board retreat. In the past, we have done board retreats just with everybody's busy schedules. Generally, that's been done in early October. I would recommend that you push off that retreat to make sure that we have the time to devote to it that we really want to have. And I would say even early November might be a little bit early. So maybe push that to January would probably be the best from my perspective. But in any case, if you have topic areas that you'd like to have considered for a board retreat, just let me know and we can begin the process to get information and organize that agenda. I am on so this week is the week of additional referendum updates. So I'm on recording a radio show for Let's Talk About It tomorrow, Wayne Byer's show on September 18th. So we're just trying to, again, get information out to people so when they come to vote, which we hope that they do on September 24th, that they have gotten all the information they need to make the right decision for them. The last issue that I have, or item that I have, is the Commonwealth request. If you remember, Commonwealth was one of those partners that we talked about in our last referendum. They were going to, if the referendum was successful, they were going to look to turn Washington Elementary into low, moderate income housing. They have, I'm sure, part of their process of looking at their community when they were here with us was looking at other entities in the community, and they did find it. I'm sure you saw it in the paper, but they have found a project with the Eagles, and they are looking to do, instead of working with the district to provide that through Washington Elementary, they're doing that at a different location, but really providing the same type of project. It's still utilizing low, tax credits to provide that housing. Now, part of that is a pilot, so payment in lieu of taxes is part of the tax abatement. If you remember in the past, we did an approval for AgriCover, and that was also a pilot, but a pilot for $0. This is a pilot, payment in lieu of tax, for $35,000 annually for $15,000, which is approximately half of what the true and full value would be. But I do want to note that approval of this as an in lieu tax, and I did make the city aware of this, but as you are well aware already, the in lieu of tax goes through deduction to equalize for equity. So really, whatever prorated portion of that $35,000 is the district's portion, we keep 25% of that. The rest of it's deducted through the funding formula. But my recommendation, similar to the other pilot requests we've had, is to draft a letter of approval because half of that is still something increased, and even with the other zero cost pilot, at some point you do access that. And if the idea is these pilots come because you wouldn't be able to do the project otherwise. So at some point the district, the community, the county does benefit from that increased tax value, but that is my recommendation. So with that, I would stand for questions.
Any questions for Dr. Leck? Jason?
Any loose ends for the referendum? I mean, is that process going? I know early voting, are they beating down the doors to vote, or?
Yes, I think we're having a good, I know that our staff at central office is pretty busy with keeping up with absentee voters. So I do think the community appreciates that opportunity. But I don't think any loose ends. We're just trying to continue to communicate, like I said earlier, so people can, we hope they come and vote on September 24th. We just want them to be educated, so whatever decision they make, they have all the facts.
Heidi?
Do you want to just mention the times to vote and just where to come to vote, just as a refresher?
So 7 to 7, the voting here in this room, actually, Thompson Community Room. We will have, we've instructed staff to park other places, so we can use all of this space for parking for voters. We will have, Jamestown Police Department will have a presence here all day long. They'll have 3 different officers on 4-hour shifts. So they'll be here helping people, directing whatever they need to do. We will be here to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible. I can't thank enough Sally and Amy for all their work. They've, I hope the board recognizes the amount of work that this has taken, and I think it's hit them the hardest. So, it's definitely something that is worth doing, but it's taken a lot of effort.
Melissa?
Just had a question as far as part of the officers being on campus. Are they going to help with kids crossing the roads here, coming to school and leaving school, since there'll be a lot of extra traffic?
Well, when I met with Chief Ettinger, I think, they recognize that their purpose is to do whatever needs to get done. That'll be, being out in front in the morning is a bigger priority than being in here. But I think those are 2 times a day in pretty brief bursts. So I think they'll be able to cover and do everything that they need to do, but they'll see what needs to happen and what doesn't.
Diane?
It's a small matter, but a couple of people have mentioned to me that we need to have a sign up at the Civic Center directing people here, because there were at least 2 that were going to go to the Civic Center.
Yeah, we can certainly do that.
Thank you for that.
I see the notes are already, pens
Yes,
smoking already.
our central office staff are feverishly writing down notes. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments for Dr. Leck related to his report? Steve?
In your opinion, does this, the project with the Eagles building, does that make it harder for us to work with them, with Washington in the future?
Yes. I don't think that there would be, I think I think there was an opportunity at one time to fulfill that need. I would doubt that there's a need for that, for that type of housing after this project. I would think that, I don't want to say that ship has sailed, but I think the needs have been met if this is approved.
Sally?
Absentee voting is going on now until they can, absentee until the day before the election, September 23rd,
At Central Office.
at central office.
And there's good signage out front of Jamestown Middle School in which doors to come in to be for the central office. So if you're not exactly sure, there is signage out the doors, and it is on the south side of the building.
Where it says administrative offices, that's where you would want to go.
Any other questions for Dr. Leck regarding his report? Okay, thank you. Moving on into board education, Dr. Leck will be providing us with education regarding the alternative pathways to teacher licensures.
So I can't claim that I created this. It was from Mari Reel from ESPB, and this was shared with me, and I can't remember if it was Mr. Gaylor or Mr. Heinert. I think it was Mr. Heinert that shared this with me. I thought it was great, and especially given some of the discussions we've had around this table recently with the difficulty in hiring some teachers in some positions, and that's happening that's happened very late this year. So it seemed appropriate to walk through some of these pathways that are less than traditional in terms of receiving teacher certification. So the first is what came through House Bill 1531. This existed in some capacity a few sessions ago, and it really went nowhere. It was how it was implemented. So the idea came back in legislative form, and that's what you call the community expert. So how this might work is, say, somebody has a wildlife biology degree. They don't have a teaching degree, but they have a wildlife biology degree. So they have a high school diploma. They have 4,000 hours or 5 years, say, working in that area, wildlife biology. There could be a pathway to get them certified in science. Okay, not something different, but in their area. So that's that community expert idea, that they have a degree, they're working, they have X amount of hours towards that area, and they could use that as a pathway to get to a degree. It's valid for 1 year at a time. It could be renewed up to 3 years. And the idea would be that they would go through mentoring, the state mentoring program, and they would get whatever else they need to get done to become eligible after that 3-year span. So that is the community expert. There's the American Board. This was also new this year. Came through House Bill 1287. It was actually one of our local legislators, Representative Satram, was a sponsor for this bill. Essentially, it works very similar to, we'll talk about the praxis later. A praxis is the test which, as a licensed teacher, I could take, and I have a social studies and English background. So I could take a praxis test as a licensed teacher in math. If I pass it, now I have more opportunities, courses that I can teach. American Board is similar to the praxis, except it is for those that have a bachelor's degree but are not in education. So again, say they have a bachelor's degree in biology. They could go through this pathway and become certified through the American Board. They just have to go through and take one of these options that's listed in the presentation: biology, chemistry, elementary ed, English, science, history. Then they could go through this process and become certified through American Board. So it's just another pathway. The out-of-field endorsement, that is how we're licensed teacher in North Dakota can teach in any area. They're not qualified to teach for the 1920 school year outside of a few different areas. They get a letter from their school administrator and a fee, and then the praxis. I also included substitute teaching license. You can look at that. And then there's also reciprocity. So if you are and that wasn't always the case. It wasn't as easy in North Dakota as it had been, or it is easier now than it had been. So now if you have a degree in Colorado, or a license in Colorado, there's reciprocity, and that'll come through into North Dakota as well. The alternative access license, so if a person holds that bachelor's degree in a content area, but they're not in education, they can get that alternate access license as well. But again, that comes down to if the school district can fill that otherwise. So there is a requirement to look for others first, and this can't be the first option. But that really is kind of a brief overview of that presentation from ESPB, from Mari Reel. But I'd stand for questions if you have any.
Mr. Toso.
I sit on the Education Standards and Practices Board, and we took a lot of time in the last legislative session reviewing these, and there were members of our board, myself included, that really swallowed hard on a couple of these, especially the teaching permit. That was a hard one. But in visiting with our staff, who works with the legislators, we kind of thought this was the best of the different pathways to teaching, that this was something we could live with. If you look at the second bullet, elementary ed, special education, and core content areas are excluded. And once that got on there, we thought this is a little bit more palatable for us. And so our staff did take that concern to the take that, our concerns and take that to the legislators who are pushing these bills. The other thing that I wanted to comment on, the reason these came up is legislators hear constantly from small schools, and we hear it on the education board, on the standards and practice board as well, that small schools are having a heck of a time attracting teachers. And when I say small schools, I don't mean maybe the Pingrees or schools that are really small. I mean some schools that are what I would consider for North Dakota good-sized schools. They're just maybe a little bit isolated. And schools that are increasingly isolated, they really have trouble. So I think the legislature was in a tough spot with this. They had to do, it comes down to, we all know Marzano's research, the number one factor in a child's education is a classroom teacher. If you don't have a highly qualified classroom teacher, the education suffers. That's a given. The problem is a poorly qualified teacher better than no teacher? And I'm not sure about that. That's one that our board struggled with. But anyway, all of these bills that Dr. Leck talked about were bills that were studied seriously by the Education Standards and Practice Board, because they are the ones that issue the teaching, whether it's a license or a permit or whichever one of these it is. But these are serious issues that have to be addressed in the state, and none of us have answers, and that's what it always came down to. If we didn't like this, what's the alternative? And there isn't much. So the only alternative is to try and get more people to go into education as a career and encourage them to go to smaller schools, if for no other thing than to start their careers. So just thought I'd add. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tosu, and we appreciate you serving on that board and being a voice with lots of years of experience in education. Dr. Leck, you had some comments?
I was just going to reinforce, and I'm sure ESPB had this conversation too. But one of the things when you look at these alternative pathways, they're pathways to credentials or license. They aren't jobs. It still comes down to school districts to interview candidates and say, this is the best person for my job. Because we all know, credentials, degrees, they mean something, but at the heart of a great teacher is relationship. How do you interact with students? How do you interact with your peers? How do you work within the system? What is your guide? What is your internal barometer to improve? All of those things make great teachers. And this is just a pathway for somebody who didn't start this way to get access to teaching. To me, it ultimately comes back to districts to say, this is the person that we want to move forward with. And but yes, all of those points are very fair. If you take this high standard and you move the standard down, you worry about what happens. But I feel we do a pretty good job of hiring people in our profession and understanding what makes good teachers. And I think that there's having a pathway to make it a little bit easier for some to pursue is at least it's a good step to make sure that that we can continue to find high-quality teachers for our districts.
Jason?
So, right, we even struggled, like Dr. Leck mentioned, on a few positions. Are other districts exploring either policies or more ways to financially assist some people, to get the appropriate credentials? And I mean, if that's happening, do we need to establish a policy within the district as far as when we'll help, to what extent? I mean, are other districts establishing those kinds of things?
I think we've dipped our toes in those waters already. I think that it only makes sense to continue to look through there. I look at things like special education teachers, those that have degrees, they're doing a great job in a classroom already. Does it make sense for us to support a master's degree in special education? which benefits the teacher, benefits the district, enter into some kind of MOU similar to what we've done in other situations and say, hey, if you work for 5 years after the receipt of this degree, then we'll pay for that. That just makes sense. EL credentials. There's opportunities. Outside of that, I think potentially, yes. Those come along at different times, though. Some of these other alternatives come, you start considering those when you get into August, July, late July, and it's clear that those aren't going to be. There's some of our CTE pathways. Those are almost always alternative in some capacity. But no, I think it makes sense. Other districts definitely are going down that path. To answer one of your questions, the next is, I think we have already started that process in looking at that, and we'll probably need to start considering more how we can grow our own in terms of some of our specialty areas, because they just aren't coming otherwise.
Sorry, last question. And then I get to these last couple slides on substitute teachers. How are we sitting as far as a pool of substitutes? And I see there's some costs available or applicable here to those licenses. How are we sitting as a district? Adequate pool of subs? Could we use, I'm sure we could always use more, but just some thoughts on that?
So I won't let the principals in the back answer, but I think we do better than most. I think one of the benefits, no, we always could use more, and if there's people out there interested in obtaining a substitute license, we'd absolutely be interested in that. We, I think, are more fortunate than a lot of districts that see a bigger issue with it because we have the University of Jamestown, and with the substitute license regulations as they are currently, now those UJ students can substitute teach in our classrooms, which if you don't have a university in your school district, you don't have that option. So we have a whole pool of people that can work for us and substitute, and it's great experience for them. It's great for us, but other districts don't have that. So I would say that we're better off than most, but absolutely we need high quality subs. I think with any absence, I think we all know that the classroom teacher is the best option in that classroom, but a high-quality sub is the second best. If that teacher has to be gone, having a high-quality sub. So, yeah, we always struggle.
Heidi, you had a comment?
I also just want to clarify for the public, the previous conversation about helping individuals obtain a master's. We're talking specialty areas such as special ed. That's very different than our Teacher Leadership Academy. Maybe you want to just mention that. I don't want people to confuse that.
So our Teacher Leadership Academy fosters and cultivates teacher leaders through North Dakota State University. 14 students are involved, 5 in Edgeley, 9 through Jamestown Public Schools. And again, that is cultivating teacher leaders, not a pathway to a principal credential, although people can take 6 additional credits. We don't pay for the Teacher Leadership Academy. That is partially paid for through the Bergham Foundation. Half of that, the Bergham Foundation very generously donates half of the cost of those credits, and the individuals themselves pay for the other half. And I'm sure some seek out some other grants and things like that to help to pay, or other avenues to help to pay. But no, that is supported by the individuals and the Bergham Foundation.
Diane?
I just wanted to add a personal anecdote. When I came into North Dakota in 2002, the standards were pretty strict. And I was holding a teaching credential from Nevada and California, and I had gotten those through 4 semesters of full-time work with my bachelor's. So back then it was harder. And then I had to do quite a few things to get my credential here in North Dakota. And then at that time, in order to substitute teach, I had to have a North Dakota credential. So the bar was very high. And all I would say is that I was surprised by that, but also I completely agree with these alternative pathways. They will get good people into the classroom. But I remember the ESPB telling me that North Dakota took pride in having highly qualified teachers and substitutes in the rooms. And I was happy about that, but I also wouldn't want to lose that sense of pride and that high bar that they were setting for me as we relax these standards. I agree that you can't tell a good teacher on paper. You have to see them in the classroom, and it's a combination of many, many things, and it's not just how many credentials they piled up. So I see the good and the bad in this, and I just want everyone to stay alert and get the best people in our classrooms.
And I just want to reinforce, too, I would concur with that, too. We always want to maintain high standards. That's not at all what I'm suggesting. I do think, though, relaxing the standards for some situations makes sense for the potential teacher, makes sense for the district, but ultimately keeping high standards in terms of hiring practices and credentialing practices, I think, are good.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you for that presentation and that good discussion. As we know, it'll affect our entire state and us here in the district. So moving on, we have nothing under old business. And then we have new business, nothing under activities, building or grounds, curriculum and assessment and instruction. So moving into finance. We are moving into, is it okay to call it early? Because was it 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock? Was it 6? Should we?
You don't have to do that anymore, but I think if we published it that way, we probably should.
Okay, so we're gonna wait on the portion A because it's not quite 6 o'clock yet for the public hearing. So let's move into item B. Can I have a motion to approve the payment in lieu of tax with Commonwealth Company? And a second? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Sorry. Any discussion? Mr. Toso, did you have some discussion? No, just thank you for that. Anybody? Do we need to do a roll call? Okay. Do you want a roll call? Would you like? Okay. Go ahead, Sally.
Melissa Gleason. Sorry. Diane Hansen.
Yes.
Roger Hout.
Yes.
Heidi Larson.
Yes.
Jason Moore. Jennifer Schmidt.
Yes.
Robert Toso.
Yes.
Steve Veldkamp. Greg Allen. Motion passes 9-0.
Thank you for that. So moving on to letter C, do we have a motion to ratify the 2019, 2020, and 2021 Administrators Master Agreement? So we have a motion by Roger and a second by Greg. Any discussion? Yes, Jason.
I move to postpone action on the administration master agreement to be placed on the same agenda as the JEA master contract ratification.
I appreciate your motion, but we already have one that's been motioned and seconded, so we would need to have a motion to rescind that, right?
You have to vote on the motion on the table.
If that fails, then someone can make
Okay.
an additional motion, is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, so we have a motion.
Another question I have is, are we officially under Robert's rules as a board, or just?
Yes, we are.
Okay, my understanding is that a postponed motion would supersede the main motion and would require a second, and is debatable. But I don't think that the motion to approve the master contract would have to pass in order to consider this motion, because I believe the motion to postpone supersedes the main motion.
I will have to refer to my notes here, just a minute. I don't know about postponing. Just a moment here. But if there's already a motion on the table.
Do you want to take a recess?
I think we're gonna have to recess to figure that out, Jason. So we'll just move to a short recess. Calling the meeting back to order at 5:56. So we have a motion from Mr. Rohr to postpone. Do I have a second? He did. To the same as the teachers, whenever the teacher's contract comes. Do I have a second? Do I have a second? So we have a second from Steve?
I'm assuming that we can discuss it.
Yes?
We would discuss only postponing it, not the motion itself.
Yep.
Or the main motion.
Yep. So we have a second, so up for discussion to postpone approving the administrator agreement until a later date. Jason?
And I just made this motion because I would like to see how our negotiations end up with our teachers before we take action on this. It is a substantial, increase compared to some of the discussions we're having with our teachers. So I just would like to see those negotiations conclude before we would take action on this.
Any other discussion? Mr. Toso?
We've worked with the administrators this fall. We've come to an agreement. I don't think one contract should have any bearing on the other. They're both a process. We're going through it with the teachers. That's taken longer than we would have liked, but we've come to an agreement with the administrators, and I would hope that we would approve that tonight.
Any other discussion? Jason?
I'll just say one more thing, that this is by no means that I don't feel our administrators are worth this. And thank you, obviously, to our board negotiators because for both the JEA and administration, because it is a lot of work and it is a process. But I do believe that we've been told over and over that we are only dealing with X number of dollars. And so, yes, from the standpoint, I do believe that the two contracts are related because we're dealing with X number of dollars.
Any other comments or questions? Heidi?
I just have a comment. It's been a long 6 months. We have 3 board members that have given a lot of their time, to negotiate with 2 entities. And it hasn't even, I know for a fact, it hasn't been convenient time for some. They've had to give up other things to negotiate with 2 groups, and it's the same 3 board members. And I appreciate their time because it's a difficult job. I don't know that we would delay any vote with any group, no matter which group it is, to put our 3 board members who negotiate in a bad position because they've been going to the table every single time, it doesn't matter what group, and negotiating in good faith. And I think that, and we as a collective board have had a lot of discussions, a lot of comparisons. We wish we had a lot more money to give to all groups, but we do have some goals for our district, and we spend a lot of time looking at trying to maintain that our district is competitive across all areas. We are falling short in some areas, but we're working toward it. It's not going to happen in a year. It's not going to happen in 2 years. It's going to take some time. And I feel a delay of a vote would put our 3 board members that we've had do this for 6 months in a very difficult position, and because they've sat at that table and worked on a negotiated, come together and agreed on something. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? So I'd like to have, Greg.
Yeah, I just want to say, in the past, in all of the negotiations, once we've come to an agreement, and there's been times where we've come to the agreement before the administrators. I mean, in fact, for a long time, we didn't even come to agreement with the administrators until after. And I think once we've come to an agreement, regardless of that agreement, we do treat these different groups separately because they are separate groups. And in my opinion, to hold back on something that's already been worked out, it just wouldn't be consistent with what we've done in the past.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, I'd like to call a roll call vote on Jason's motion.
Diane Hansen?
No.
Roger Hout?
No.
Heidi Larson?
No.
Jason Rohr?
Yes.
Jennifer Schmidt?
No.
Robert Toso?
No.
Steve Veldkamp?
No.
Greg Allen?
No.
Melissa Gleason? Motion fails, 8-1.
And so now we are back to the original motion on the floor. We have a first and a second to approve the Administrator's Master's Agreement. Is there any discussion? And so I will call, Jason.
Sorry. Did we, and maybe it's not appropriate to discuss here, so just shut me off if it's not, but what is the total cost of the district for this approved, or if we approve this to the district?
Hang on, we will get you that.
Well, they haven't changed since they were provided before.
Yeah.
We have provided that before. We don't have a copy of that right now, but we certainly can get it for you.
Would that be sufficient for you, Mr. Rohr? Okay. So we do want to make sure you have that available. All right, so with that, then I will call for a roll call vote for approval.
Heidi Larson? Yes. Jason Rohr?
No.
Jennifer Schmidt?
Yes.
Robert Toso?
Yes.
Steve Veldkamp?
Yes.
Greg Allen?
Yes.
Melissa Gleason? Diane Hansen?
Yes.
And Roger Hout.
Yes.
Motion passes 8-1.
All right, so now it's a little past 6. We're going to move back on our agenda to letter A into the public hearing portion. So we are going to have Business Manager Sally Ost and Dr. Leck provide any context to the budget, which may answer some questions. For anyone choosing to address the board, there are some sheets in the back that we would recommend you take a look at because there are some instructions down at the bottom of the page in order for you to address the board. And as a reminder to our board members, this is not a question answer type of session. This is more for us to hear their perspective. Dr. Leck?
Thank you. We have approved, as the board is aware, a preliminary budget. That's been considered and approved earlier this year. A formal budget approval requires a budget hearing, In the past, that has been done through a calculation, as you remember, called the zero mills calculation, that we are no longer required to do that. The district, even when we, in the past, even when we did not require a budget hearing, we chose to have one anyway, even in those years in which we didn't technically need to have one. I think it's an important part of the process for an entity that has for a public entity to have that budget process. For us, the formal budget approval is planned for October 7th at that school board meeting. So part of this hearing is just as Mrs. Schmidt had said, to provide some context and then give an opportunity for any patrons, if they wish to address the board. In the past, what has happened and what is policy for public comment is you provide about 3 to 5 minutes per speaker. But prior to opening that opportunity to the floor, I think it's prudent to share information related to some of the meeting requirements, interpretation of the requirement, rationale for the increase, and the estimated impact on taxpayers for property tax increase. So the current request in 1819, the current, the impact of the school portion of property taxes in the previous year was, on a $100,000 home, was $450. With a continuation of the same tax levy as last year, that tax impact would be the same. The district was at 100 mills last year, would continue to be at 100 mills this next year, assuming what we know now. There is, as we know, a referendum coming up next week, and that would give the board different levy authority in the building fund. The impact of this, however, in this budget hearing, we are considering 100 mills to 100 mills. So the impact of that, depending on what the patrons say, that may change, but that is not a discussion for this. This hearing assumes 100 mills because that's what we know. So that would be $450, and I do feel the need to note that this is not related to any reassessment. Any reassessment that it isn't include, that's not an apples to apples comparison. If a reassessment has happened, you certainly may pay more than you had in the past year at the same levy. But in an apples to apples comparison, 100 mills, same true and full value of a home, you'd pay the same cost. I do think it's important. I included a chart on this. I'd be happy to share it with anybody that's interested that may not have it. But in the 2008-2009 school year, the school district's tax levy, I just said our proposed tax levy next year is 100 mills. So the proposed tax levy in 2008-9 was 236.4. So substantially higher than the 100 mills the district is levying this year. And some of it related to tax buy down by the legislature that decreased, as we know, from 185 mills eventually down to the 72 mills that, or the 70 mills that we have now. In 2009-10, that went down again with legislation to 161.4 mills. The impact of those last two being 1,063.80 and 726.30. So comparatively to the 450, that's estimated at that $100,000 home significantly less than 8-9 and 9-10 school years. If you look to the 13-14 school year, it was 101.82. So a slight decrease from even the 13-14 year, which was $458.19 on that same $100,000 home. So just providing that a little sense of context. If you look to application of the funding formula, the next portion of that memo, and I know the board has talked about this at length through board education, through other outlets, but I want to reaffirm for those watching and those in the audience too. There has been a shift pretty substantially in our funding formula from a state-focused, property-centric formula to a student-centric equalizing formula. And so one of the ways that that's equalized is through a couple of different components of equity, and that happens through some adjustments. The state calls them adjustments, I call them deductions, but the state adjusts certain aspects based on our local funding. So they adjust out 60 mills, so we know that we have 100 mills. 60 of those mills are adjusted out of our funding. We don't have the ability to access all of those 60 mills because they become deducted. So it is almost like a state levy. It is not a state levy, but it's almost like one. If we can levy 60, they deduct 60 from our per pupil. So regardless of what the per pupil amount is, it gets deducted the value of those 60 mills. The other component that gets equalized out is payment in lieu or in lieu taxes. That's also deducted out at 75%. So just as a simple example, if you get $1,000 out in a in lieu tax, that if the district does receive that $1,000 in lieu tax, say it's telecom or mobile home tax, the state will deduct 75% of that out of our state foundation aid. So that's just a way, and really the reason they do it, the formula works exactly as it's supposed to. It equalizes districts. I think we all know, just looking at our state as a whole, if you look to the west, or if you looked at our heavy urban centers, it is different. There are more opportunities based on property wealth, based on mineral wealth, based on students and taxable value growth. And so what our new formula does is it takes all of the at least the value of the 60 mills and the in lieu taxes, it throws them together and then redistributes. So it's a way to equalize and to minimize property rich, property poor, haves and have-nots. The reason I bring that up, though, is it's important that we recognize what the formula does. So the per pupil says $98.39 a kid per student. That's not what we get. We get that minus deductions. And I think it's important that we understand that. I think as a governing board, as administrators, we understand that. And I think it's important that the patrons understand that a lot of what we receive in terms of revenue, whether that comes from local, whether that comes from in lieu, is equalized out. And that's redistributed across the state, meaning McKenzie County, Jamestown, Fargo, Drake, we all pay our portion. And that's the way that it's intended to be. And so if people want more information on that, there is a presentation that I do to new administrators that I've done to our House and Senate Education Committee on how the formula works. I think it's a kind of a basic primer that can walk you through the process. I'm not going to do that today, but the other thing you could look at is the September 2019 state aid payment worksheet that also walks you through the process and shows you what we have, what we don't have. I won't do that for you unless there's specific questions related to it. The other portion that I want you to recognize is related to average daily membership. Now, we do have an increase in student enrollment this year, and we know that. It's a lot of that is the benefit of having a small class graduate, having a large class of kindergartners. So it's a great problem to have, but with increased enrollment comes increased cost. We're well aware that we hired we split another section, added another teacher in kindergarten. The tough thing about the formula is that it pays us a year behind. So we're paid on that smaller senior class, even though we have the costs related to one of our largest kindergarten classes. So we have to absorb those costs for a year. New materials, the additional teacher, we have to do that every year. We're paid on the year behind. So is it a benefit to have additional students? Absolutely. We'll get that funding next year. We don't get it this year. I have included some additional examples in there for those if you have questions. We do have some fluid issues that I think are important to discuss and to talk about. Those are, number one, Sally and I work constantly to review the budget and to make sure that we're what I call right-sizing our budget. Budget is a fluid thing. What exists in our budget last week looks somewhat different than what it looks like this week. We're trying to trim every chance that we can. We're trying to update every chance that we can. So when we bring that budget on October 7th, it is as right as we can be, understanding that we have a full year and costs fluctuate and change. But we do the best that we can. We won't have a balanced budget, although we'll try as hard as we can to make sure that we do. But I'm just being honest and saying it's probably not going to happen. But we continue to look, and Sally's going to talk you through the budget when I'm done, or at least just a general overview from what you've seen. But we do those adjustments to maximize efficiency and opportunities the best that we can. Some examples, recently, reorganizing our CTE administrators. That's one way to enhance that reimbursement that we can, try to maximize efficiency. The Striving Readers Grant has afforded us some flexibility through how we're utilizing those funds. So those are all opportunities that we're trying to maximize to get the best bang for our buck. But like any organization, salaries and benefits, largest portion of the budget. That's not a surprise to anybody. And unfortunately, that's still in flux as of the late date today. Our increase in enrollment helps, but it doesn't help until next year. But we have all those costs that are associated with moving forward and trying to move our district forward. Things like operationalizing our strategic plan, adding additional staffing, lots of different factors. And I would reiterate some of the comments that have been made earlier in terms of the negotiations process. The board and teacher negotiators, administrator negotiators continue to work hard to try to make this district the most attractive it can be to recruit and to retain people. Whether that is certified staff, whether that's non-certified support staff, whether that's administrators or our non-teaching professionals. I think the district, the board, has done a really good job in trying to maximize those schedules. Some places, as the board has talked about before, you do compare more favorably than others. So you have to continue to look at that, where do you compare favorably, where don't you? And with limited dollars, you're going to have to prioritize those things. And that's, as somebody earlier said, I think it was Heidi, in a best case, you have the ability to, everybody that works in this district works pretty hard. And they deserve the most that you can afford to give them. And I don't think, I would challenge anybody that challenges that statement, because people work hard in this district and they do a great job. And I think as a board, you have the difficult job of saying this is the best we can do with what we got. And, that can be tough sometimes. But I think the board has a great plan. And that plan is to continue to offer the best salaries and benefits that you can, recognizing how people compare to their peers, recognizing what you're going to have to do to make that attractive for people to come here and stay here. I don't envy your position. That's tough. It's a tough situation to be in, but you guys you're all doing a great job in making sure that we can recruit and retain high quality people. The last piece is our budget deficit. We do have a deficit. We likely will have a deficit. We have worked really hard in the last 6 years to bring that down to manageable levels. And I wish that I could tell you it's going to be balanced, but I can't. It's going to be negative, and Sally's going to talk through that. But like I said, it's a pretty fluid thing, and I think that through continued examination, we're doing better than we could. We're really trying to make that as palatable and as manageable as possible. And I think every time we sit down and comb through that, that makes that a little bit better. And then I come into Sally's office and say, but I want to do something different. I want to add this, and that makes it harder. But Sally's a wizard. She does a great job, and like I said, she'll talk about that. But the reality is, we have 70 general fund mills, 12 miscellaneous mills, 7 tuition mills. What am I missing? Special assessment. We're doing the best we can with what we have. There's not a lot of room to grow. There are not general fund mills to capture. They are 70 is the max, and that's where we are. There are not miscellaneous mills to capture. They are at 12. That's where we are. The areas we could change, special assessment, you can only levy what you take, what you need. So we can't levy more than that. Tuition, you can levy what you could levy what you bring in. And I think our public has said 100 mills is where we're capped out. There isn't per se a cap on tuition. It's, I suppose, what you spend, but we aren't there. But I think our community has said, you're at a fair place here. we're levying higher than the state average in tuition. So I think asking people for more there, I think our community, as I said, has told us where they're at. And I think they're feeling up to their ceiling. So in terms of these different levies. So that is what I had. And Sally, you had, is there a question?
Just real quick for my own education, what would be like a miscellaneous mill?
So the miscellaneous mill, the miscellaneous levy it's an amalgamation of the previously different voter-approved levies. So it is board authority on how you're going to expend them, but it is the amalgamation of the old technology levy, the old asbestos levy, the old transportation levy. They said they were all eliminated and replaced with 12 mills in the miscellaneous. So prior to the miscellaneous levy, in those different levies, Jamestown levied 12. And that's, if you add them all up, some districts were able to maximize that and get some additional levy authority. We weren't, because we were one of the districts at the highest level of those different miscellaneous levies. So we just saw the ability to continue what we had.
Sally, would you like to go over your portion, please?
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Leck. The budget is always, changing, and by October 7th, it will have to be. I will bring the detail to you. In the drive is the summary draft, but at the October 7th meeting, like I said, I will have each line item detailed out. Going over it, in the local, 23% of our revenue comes, from miscellaneous revenue, including, the bulk of it is what Dr. Leck was talking about, the funds from the county, and that number is not final from the county, but I think the estimate is pretty close. The county funds are the coal conversion money that we receive. That's the estimated amount at this point on that dollar. The state revenue is any state grants and our funding from the state, and that's 68% of our budget. And then the federal dollars, which we have just been recently getting final reports on dollars and those type of thing, which is 8% currently. Obviously, we're fortunate enough to have the Striving Readers Grant, so our federal dollars are a little bit higher. So our revenue projection at this point is $30 million, a little over $30 million, $30,249,822. In our expenditure side, obviously, the bulk of our budget is, salary and benefits. That constitutes 70% of the budget. Currently, salaries of a little over $17 million and benefits of $5,800,000. So that's 70% of it. The remainder of the budget is, professional services are, contracted with James River, some of those expenditures. And, the 400 categories is a lot of repair and maintenance. The 500 categories are, things like postage, telephone, transportation, which is a big cost. And then 600 is supply category, textbook, that type of thing. And our equipment, the bulk of that is, technology, but also other equipment. And then the 800s is, the bulk of that is license and fees that we pay for software and that type of thing, or registration to conference. And then the 900 is it's unobligated federal dollars, our transfer to school activities, those type of expenses. So currently, right now, at this point, talk to me tomorrow, it'll change, $30,297,000, so showing about a little over almost $48,000 deficit. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Sally. So at this time, I will open the meeting up for public comment. It doesn't appear that we have anyone wishing to address the board at this time. Are there any questions or comments from the board related to the documents that were presented? Heidi?
I just wanted to comment on the years I've been on the board. The ability to raise funds at a local district has dramatically changed. We used to have a lot more local control. increasing mills and those kinds of things. And we've lost a lot of local control. I'm not saying it's bad. It's very different than but it doesn't give us a lot of wiggle room, though. I guess that is the difficult part. So.
Yeah, when you review that funding formula, that's clearly evident, and then providing us with that information from 2003, 4, with having 280 some mills compared to today where we have 100. It is different. It is different. All right. Anything else? All right, well, with that, then we will go ahead and resume back into our regular meeting. Moving on under finance to letter D, there is some information there for us determining tuition agreements. Is there any additional information besides what's in the drive? No. All right, any questions regarding what's in the drive? All right, thank you. And then to letter E, can I have an approval for the elementary music grant in the amount of $13,000?
So moved.
Motion by Jason, seconded by Heidi. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Letter F, can I have an approval for the first robotic CTE innovation grant in the amount of $3,500? Motion by Roger, seconded by Bob. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Can I have a motion to approve the August monthly financial report? Motion by Diane, seconded by Bob. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We have nothing under personnel or policy and procedure. Moving on into tuition. Could I have a motion to approve the tuition agreement for a 9th and 11th grade Jamestown student to attend Oaks Public School for the 2019-2020 school year? Motion by Melissa, second by Roger. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Can I have an approval for a tuition agreement for an 11th grade Montpelier student to attend Jamestown Public Schools for the 2019-2020 school year?
So moved.
Motion by Jason. Second by Steve. All those any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. And opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Under other, we do have a need for a motion to approve the revised 2019-2020 school calendar. Motion by Mr. Toso. Second by Roger. Any discussion? Jason?
Just what was the revision or?
So if you look at it, it has the change in the times for Wednesdays, starting after teachers' convention. So the school day will start that 1 hour later. Students may still arrive at the same time. There will be constructive activities for them to do, but the school day will not start until an hour later to provide our teachers with opportunity for growth and development for their PLCs, professional learning communities. So yes, that's what it's for. Any other questions or comments? Oh, Mr. Leck, Dr. Leck?
Well, the only other thing I wanted to reference in the revision of the school calendar would be that our late starts would replace would replace our early dismissals, right? So after our first early dismissal with this change, we would transition only to late starts. When we went through, and this was you were absent at the last meeting, we did talk about this slightly, but I just wanted to make sure that people were aware. One of the avenues we went through to get feedback on this was a focus group, parents, teachers, school board member, administrators, on how to take advantage of the days to hours shift. And one of the things we heard back from parents was that the early dismissals were a little bit onerous. Because that's outside of their day, normal day, 4 times a year. So 4 times a year, they had to find out, well, I don't get off work at that time, so what am I going to do with my child from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock when I usually had something else to do? So the late starts were important, and as Mrs. Schmidt said, the late starts, if you drop your child off at 8 o'clock every day, you're going to continue to drop your child off at 8 o'clock every day. We might start with teachers later, but they're going to have enrichment opportunities or other opportunities in their day. But if you could drop them off at 9:30, and that was something that worked for your family, and you wanted to make sure they had breakfast at home or they could sleep in, that is your responsibility. Then you certainly have that opportunity to do that. Buses would run the same school opportunity, or the doors would open at the same time. So we felt like this was the way we could benefit our teachers but making sure that we weren't inconveniencing parents and students and providing more opportunities for students. So just want to make sure that everybody understands that. And we will be sending out a communication with all of our families this week to let them know that this revised schedule is in place and what we might be doing and how they can, how that impacts their family.
All right, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Moving on to other business, moving on to items for future agenda. Does anyone have items that they'd like to be discussed or covered? I guess, Dr. Leck, I would like maybe come January, after this is implemented in October, maybe an address from a teacher and an administrator on how this PLC 1 hour late start or classroom time is working. And in addition to that, what are those constructive activities that we're doing with our kids? How many kids are coming early? Just out of curiosity on that. Also, in our information, you provided us with our student enrollment, which was nice to see. Could we also get some information on what our classroom sizes are?
Sure.
We can maybe calculate it, but I'd like to see what that is. And I think that was everything that I had thought of. Anybody else? All right. So going on here, we have meetings to be scheduled tomorrow. Oh, sorry, Heidi.
Later in the year, also, if we could get another updated report from Dollars for Scholars. We had a lot of great activities that Dollars for Scholars have been working on, shoe drives and all kinds of things, and sponsorships at games and those kinds of things. And so just have an update as to how that's going.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's any shoes left to donate in the community. That was a fantastic drive. All right, very good.
I can say we're replenishing at the Leck House.
Yeah.
All right. So, meetings to be scheduled then. Tomorrow evening, we have a negotiations meeting with the teachers here in this room at 5 o'clock. Our next school board meeting will be we have the school board election on Tuesday, September 24th, and that is all day in this room from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Then following that, we'll have a school board canvassing meeting on Monday, September 30th at 5:15. A district school improvement committee meeting on Thursday, October 3rd at 3:30 here in this room. And then we will have a regularly scheduled board meeting October 7th at 5:15 in this room. So moving on to the next item. Anybody got it open? Oh, go for it.
I, Bob Tosley. Whoops, I'm sorry. I, Bob Tosa, believe that discussion with our negotiators in developing a strategy relative to the school board's position in this matter in open session would have an adverse fiscal effect on the negotiations position of the board. Therefore, I move that the board enter into executive session, that the following members and negotiators be identified as being present. School board members, Melissa Gleason, Diane Hansen, Roger Hout, Heidi Larson, Jason Rohr, Jennifer Schmidt, Robert Toso, Steve Velkamp, Superintendent Robert Leck, and Business Manager Sally Ost. That the date and time are September 16th at 6:40. And only the following topic will be considered an executive session negotiation strategy. That the legal authority for the executive session is Section 44-04-19.1 of the North Dakota Century Code, that the executive session be recorded.
Second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So we are going to exit here for a executive session. We will return when we finish with that to close out the regular meeting. Thank you.